So this is unusual, but you'll get paid directly from that homeowner. You'll get your money, and you're going to give them back the deed, and you're going to make 20% penalty return. Nice return. Welcome back. Now, today's episode is a discussion about Georgia tax deeds, which are redeemable and different from tax lien certificates and regular tax deeds. So the good news is, according to the Fulton County Commissioner of Taxes, 97% of the taxpayers will pay their taxes directly to the tax collector. So that's all good news. So investors doing real estate, when it comes to redeemable deeds, they really like that, because what's going to happen with a redeemable deed, if you buy one, then you have an excellent chance of getting paid, according to the treasurer, 97%, and the penalty is at 20% in the first year. So that's a pretty darn good investment. So Fulton County population is a large population for Georgia for sure. As a matter of fact, it's about 10% of the whole population of the state of Georgia. Fulton County is one of the best in the state as far as collecting taxes. I'm not sure all of those rural counties, there's 159 counties in Georgia, I'm not sure they all do as well as Fulton County. So if you've ever been to downtown Atlanta, well, you know what Fulton County is all about. There's a lot of wealthy people that live there. Okay, according to the tax commissioner, 99% of the tax people that default end up paying their tax in Fulton County, Georgia. So investors at these auctions sometimes get confused. So let me see if I can straighten the whole process out and make sure that you feel comfortable with it. Georgia happens to be my favorite state, and you're learning why right now, because you can make a 20% return and people are paying the taxes. Well, if you can make a 20% return in a year, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, so the process is quite simple, okay? Now, I say it's simple, that doesn't always mean it's easy for everybody, but let me review it with you right now. If the property owner fails to pay the tax, the Fulton County tax collector, call it the tax commissioner, will file a lien against the property. So write this down. He'll file a lien, and that means that's a FIFA, F-I-F-A, okay, a FIFA. Now, the only state that uses that term is the state of Georgia. I think it's a Latin term. I'm really not sure what it was. I know I learned it somewhere along the line. But anyway, they're going to file a FIFA. What you need to know is they're going to file a lien. In other words, you don't pay your tax, you're going to get a lien. That would happen with a tax lien, and so kind of the same thing. So look, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a real estate broker. And I'm just an average person that learned how to do this. And I'm basically a publisher and a person that's an investor. So that's how I learned this. So when I tell you about FIFAs and things like that, you need to research the county records and the legislative records, in other words, the statutes for the state. So I'm not giving you legal advice by any means, and I'm not a financial advisor or any of those things. All right, but Georgia County liens are pretty easy to get involved in, and they're going to sell a redeemable deed, but it acts just like a tax lien certificate. So I'm just discussing defaults throughout the state of Georgia, okay? Now, I'm looking at this whole thing through a lens. Now, my lens right here is only interested in making money with tax defaulted property, tax lien certificates, and of course, in this case, redeemable deeds. So remember, redeemable deeds is going to be a little bit different. Now, there's 5 other states that do these redeemable deeds. I don't know if I get that covered in this lesson, but I'll cover it in one of the subsequent lessons. So Georgia has 159 counties. They're all taxing districts. What's a taxing district? It's an individual jurisdiction that allows the county commissioners or the board of supervisors, whichever they have, they can charge their own tax rates. And in this case, Georgia, the state law says you can charge up to 20% penalty. So the legislature really made all the laws. Then they take those laws and they push them down to the tax commissioner or to the board of supervisors or county commission. That happens in all the states in the United States. Remembering now, this is a penalty return. So that means if I raise my hand, I buy a redeemable deed, I buy it, I take the deed home, I put it on my desk. If they come in the next day and pay, they're going to have to give me back all my money plus 20%. So 100% return plus 20%, and that could happen in 1 day or it could happen in 365 days. So I hope you're kind of getting what I'm talking about. All right, so the laws refer to statutes. Basically, It's simple, but for a lot of people, this isn't easy because they get it all confused with tax liens and tax default property. So this is nothing more than what they do in about 5 of the states, Georgia being a principal one that does that. Texas does the same thing. They sell a redeemable deed. That means the property owner can come forward at any time and buy the deed back. So if you bought the deed, you now control the property. That doesn't mean that you can go on that property. You can't go on that property. You can't try to collect rent on the property. You can't try and root the people out. You can't do anything. There's a small percentage of property owners that don't pay the tax. So now they're in default. You pay the tax. In Georgia, you bought a redeemable deed. Now that redeemable deed can stay outstanding for 1 year. All right, anytime during that 1 year, the property owner can come in and pay you. In other words, redeem the deed. You give them back the deed. However, you get all your money back plus 20%. Is that a good deal? No, that's not a good deal. That's an absolutely great deal. All right, so remember, it's a fixed rate of return. It's a penalty return. It's not an amortized rate of so much every single month. It's one rate and it's 24%. Who enforces all this? Well, the tax commissioner in the state of Georgia is going to enforce all this. All right, so there's nothing really sneaky about it or anything like that. They're right up front and they tell you exactly what they're going to do, and anybody can buy these redeemable deeds. All right, so how are you going to get your money? Well, I can tell you right now, as soon as they've sold that deed, then the commissioner steps aside, and this is kind of unusual because what's going to happen now is that homeowner or property owner is going to have to pay you directly. So this is unusual, but you'll get paid directly from that homeowner. You'll get your money, and you're going to give them back the deed, and you're going to make 20% penalty return. Nice return. All right, so Georgia law gives the property owner a right to redeem the property. However, it gives you, when you buy the redeemable deed, it gives you the right to enforce the levy that you have on the property. Remember, taxes are now a levy on that property, and a levy can be enforced by the sheriff. So if you can't collect the money, you can have the sheriff go try and collect it, and if they won't pay you, no problem. You can take over the property. All right, so the auction usually takes place right on the courthouse steps, and the person that does that, sometimes called an auctioneer or an ex officio auctioneer or auctioneer sheriff. All right, so they have different terms, but that doesn't matter. You'll get the idea. It's just like all the other auctions, except now we're talking about a redeemable deed which the property owner can come forward anytime, pay you back your money that you invested, and give you a 20% return. All that goes away in 12 months. And I'm going to tell you, don't foreclose. Let it go into the next month because you'll make a better return. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of what a treasurer had to say. All right, these aren't my words, so I'll have to read some of it so I get it. But Arthur Fernando was the tax commissioner at the time, so I took this right out of the record so that you'll get what's really going on. So an illustration of what we're talking about today is the example is a $200,000 property is being foreclosed on, and what's happened is they're going to have the sheriff or the ex officio sheriff do that, and they're going to have some fees for that, all right? So let's say the fees were $5,000. All right, so now the winning bid that comes there, they say, well, this is a nice property. So someone raised their hand, they bid $100,000. So they're going to have to pay $100,000. When they pay that, well, guess what? Now what's going to happen is they're going to have to continue for 365 days. During that 365 days, anytime that property owner wants to come forward, they're going to have to come forward and not only pay the $100,000, but they're going to have to pay the 20%. Under the existing law, the redemption price shall be the amount paid, which is what I just said, and any special taxes or assessment. So it might go a little bit above that, this point I'm trying to make. All right, the premium bid is what I'm getting at here. All right, so according to the treasurer, the premium bid of 20% has to be paid. Otherwise, they don't get the deed back. So you kind of get the idea. So I paraphrased it pretty good there, but you're getting the idea. If you paid $100,000 for that certificate, you get your money back plus 20%, and that's a pretty darn good rate of return. All right, now, the sheriff is going to have a lot of participation in all this. So generally, we don't have to do much with the sheriff. But in Georgia, they're going to have either an ex officio or a sheriff do all this work because the treasurer just kind of backs out and lets them do all the work. All right, so the property owner is going to have to come up with money. You certainly have got that. All right, you're going to have to do nothing more except wait for your money, and you're going to get your money back plus a 20% return. All right, now who likes this business? Well, everybody likes it, especially entrepreneurs, okay? Now, what's an entrepreneur? It's someone that wants to work their hours working on what they want, when they want to, and this is a perfect business for that because in Georgia, they have 159 counties and they sell these at auction every single month. All right, so that county is authorized to have a monthly auction. So every month, there's auctions taking place in Georgia. So this is a good place for an entrepreneur to work. So this business works, and you're going to make money depending on how hard you work. So if you put in long hours, you're going to do quite well. If you don't put in any time, you're probably not going to do very good. So if you're willing to work, and I know most entrepreneurs are, this is going to be a good business for you. Now, you're going to have to think out of the box a little bit, yes, because it's not a tax lien, it's not a tax deed, it's a redeemable deed. So if you're a problem solver, I've given you all the answers on it right now. So for those viewers that haven't done this business before, I've probably explained this pretty well for now. I'm just pointing out the highlights. For sure, you can read the local statutes. You can get those on the county website. You can get them on the state website. And sometimes the auctioneers will have those so that they even hand them out. But you need to read the statutes and know what the laws are in the state that you're doing. So if you're a motivated student, I'll show you what a motivated student can do. So only 100 miles from Fulton County, one of my students, I went to an auction and a property was up for sale. Now remember, when I say a property, what I really mean is a redeemable deed is up for sale. So the redeemable deed was on a single family home and the price was less than $3,000. All right, so a small group there, but nobody bid. And so my student raised a hand, and sure enough, they bought the redeemable deed for $2,901. So they don't get the property. All they get is a piece of paper. They're not allowed to go on the property. They have to wait that 1 year. So he waited that 1 year. The people never came forward. So he foreclosed on that right of redemption, and he owned the property. So what did he do with the property? Well, he tidied it up and cleaned it up. I'm shortening the story a little bit and put some signs on it, let people know it was for sale. Turned around, he bought it for $2,900. He spent money cleaning it up, touching up the paint. Turned out the property was filled with furniture and even had a car and a boat that was left there. People just left all that. And so then he put the property up for sale. And he made $30,000 profit on that property. He only invested $3,000 to start, invested some money in fix-up and whatever, but he ended up with $30,000. You wouldn't want to do too many deals like that, I'm sure. That's a great deal. Everybody would like to do that. All right, so this is happening all the time. You see those little white circles? That's how many auctions are taking place within that state. This calendar updates every single day. I'm here today to show you how to make money. To do that, I'm going to show you briefly that there are thousands of tax defaulted real estate properties across the 3,000 plus counties in the United States. This is quite interesting. You're looking at the Ted Thomas Magic Interactive Map and Auction Calendar. It changes every day. Now, I created the calendar and the map so I would know how many auctions are taking place every day in the United States. Now I can show the little guy how to make money. Most importantly, I created this system so I could have an auction list for each auction 24/7. Now, in the small counties, small population county, there's literally dozens, sometimes hundreds of these tax defaulted properties. In large population counties, like we just talked about, Fulton County, there's going to be hundreds. A place like Los Angeles will have thousands of these tax defaulted properties. You can find out more about those, where they are and how many, by just go right below me and we'll show you where you can get information on finding out how you can find out more about tax defaulted property. I'm Ted Thomas. I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget, request your free gift right below me.